What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. So recently I have been doing a lot of little things to the V6 MR2. I did not film everything just because there were things either I didn't feel like were worth filming, or there are things that I have done before. One of the things I did was actually test fit wheels on the front of this car. My goal for it is to have a pretty meaty aggressive setup that's also functional. In the rear, the plan is to run a 285 on a 18x11. It's gonna be a pretty straightforward thing. I just have to do the flares and cut up the back. The front of the car is where things get a little tricky. I wanna run a 17x10 with a 255. My buddy John actually ran that setup on the front of his MR2. He had custom parts made to be able to make that work, specifically custom front spring perches. The spring perch and locking collar that comes with most coilovers just don't provide as much clearance. Also, in case anyone was curious, a lot of the body panels that I got on this car, so essentially the whole front clip, came off the car that I just showed you. Anyways, I know I can make these setup fit though. When I tested it, I was really curious how far I can go without getting custom parts made. I don't have the exact wheel that I want to run on the car just because I don't have the money for it yet, but I have something very similar. So what I happen to run on the backside of the MR2 is a 255/40 on a 17x9 with a plus 42 offset. And what I want to run is a 255/40 with a 17x10 with a plus 42 offset. So they're going to be pretty identical. And I know that this would end up giving me a very rough ballpark of how the 17x10 would fit without custom parts. A couple of quick things to note for anyone who's going to consider some type of really meaty aggressive setup. You're going to need a few things. First is Wilhelm top hats. They lean the coilover more towards the midline of the car, which is going to allow you for extra clearance. Of course, because of that, you're going to also probably have to switch out crash bolts. So this is like, I guess, an OEM size, which is, I believe it's like 13.9 millimeters. And I swapped out two smaller crash bolts here, which are 12.4 millimeters. So they just allow more camber adjustment. If you don't swap out the crash bolts, you may end up with too much camber. It's really going to depend on the specific top hat you get, because Wilhelm has 3 variations. So like he has his mild, standard, and extreme. So something to consider. These top hats can also add a caster. So if you have a 93 plus MR2 like I do, you'll have a non-adjustable strut rod, and you're going to want to swap out for a adjustable one. So this one is a Wilhelm Raceworks strut rod, and you could see the difference there. So no adjustment, adjustment. If you have a 91 to 92 MR2, you already have that adjustment from the factory, so there's no need to swap out unless, well, you want to for some reason. Another thing to note is that you're going to need to hammer down the pinch weld right here. On this car, it's not hammered down just yet, and here's a good example of that pinch weld hammered down. Anyways, on to the actual test fitting. I did a few variations. I ended up swapping both of these crash bolts out, and I went with 2 of the smaller ones. So these are the ones that are, I believe, 12.4 millimeters in size. I ended up adding a 12 mil spacer, which makes the effective offset of this plus 30. And with this particular setup, this barely fits. I mean, I have like a millimeter of space, if that. When you consider the car being under load and everything like that, this will not work because it would end up rubbing. When it comes to the coilovers, these two cars have different setups. So this one has BC coilovers on it, the BR series, which is just the entry level. And then this car over here has the Fortune Autos. So I went ahead and put the 17x9 on, the 12 mil spacer, and then I have 2 of the smaller crash bolts on. And that gives me substantially more room. I'm able to actually easily fit a 5 mil spacer in between the wheel and the coilover on this setup. There can be a couple different reasons for the difference between the 2 coilovers and the fitment. So spring diameter, spring perches, which I can say in this situation, that's not the case. They're pretty identical between both coilovers. The difference is actually here at the bracket that meets the knuckle. There's just more adjustment on the Fortune Autos compared to the BC coilovers. All this test fitting really confirms that if I do end up wanting to run the 17x10, I'm going to need to get custom spring perches made. When you start getting into custom parts, the cost really adds up. So it kind of makes me think that I might take a slightly different approach. And what I might do instead, in the back, I'll still run a 18x11, but I think I'll do a 275. And then in the front, I'll go down to a 17x9 and run a 245. So I still have that 30 mil stagger that I like. Anyways, that's all I got for this video. If you got any questions, leave them down in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer them. I'm definitely not an expert by any means. I'm just a guy who likes to tinker, but I also like to be helpful where I can. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.